Servus Männer, it's Red Pill Germany again. The first results from the state election in Sachsen-Anhalt are in. Today, on this Sunday, the citizens of Sachsen-Anhalt elected their local parliament, their state parliament in Magdeburg. Earlier this week, I made a video about the polls, and the polls predicted that the AfD and the CDU would battle it out for position number 1, and it also predicted huge gains for the Liberal Party and the Green Party. The actual result now from this Sunday looks much different than the polls. Here you can see what I reported about earlier this week. The polls, you see CDU and AfD were predicted to perform in the mid to high 20s and the other parties around 10%. I'm simplifying here, of course. And the result from tonight looks now like this. We have 36% for the CDU, 23% for the AfD, 10.9 or around about 11% for the Commie Party, only 8% for the Social Democrats, almost 7% for the Liberal Party, that is a little less than predicted, and the Green Party only 6%. But I have to say that at the last election, 2016, the Liberal Party didn't make it into the parliament. So there is this 5% bar. You have to have more than 5% of the popular vote in order to make it into parliament. And this time the Liberal Party, FDP, is in parliament. And that might become important for finding a coalition in the end. So in today's video, I want to comment a little bit on this result that is deviating from the polls, but it is not surprising actually. I'm not really surprised by this. And then I want to talk a little bit about possible coalitions and what is going on in Sachsen-Anhalt now. So we already covered the results, and if you look at the seats, you need 42 seats to have a simple majority, and that is the minimum requirement for a stable ruling coalition between these parties, of course. The AfD will be, of course, the largest opposition party. A coalition between the CDU and the AfD would be mathematically very robust, very stable, but that's not gonna happen, of course. So the AfD will once again become the largest opposition party in the Landtag of Magdeburg. The current coalition, so that was in office since the last election, is also still possible, and that is the CDU, the Green Party, and the SPD. That is the so-called Kenya coalition. And as I already mentioned in previous videos, that coalition is of course not a marriage of love. That is a awkward necessity to keep the AfD from power, because as you can imagine, the CDU and the Green Party, they don't really like each other. The SPD is working together with the CDU a lot in recent years, or for a couple of decades already, and forming these grand coalitions because there is nothing else really possible, especially on the federal level, but also in many states. But if you add the Green Party, that is just awkward and doesn't really work well. If you have pragmatic local politicians, it might work, but there is a lot of friction and a lot of incidents are coming from the federal level, and you need really disciplined politicians in order to make this work. And apparently it worked. It didn't collapse prematurely. It lasted until the next election this year. But as I already said, there is a Germany coalition, they call it now, when you take this Kenya coalition and you replace the Green Party with the Liberal Party, you get black, red, and yellow. So of course it is gold in our flag, but still close enough. So black, red, and yellow, CDU, SPD, Liberal Party. That would actually work ideologically a little better, I would say. Those are the traditional parties of the old Western Republic when Bonn was still our capital. So the system was that the CDU and the SPD, they were the big parties, and the FDP, they were just switching sides every now and then, and they decided in the end who is ruling, who can have the majority. The FDP was always in the comfortable position that they just have to change the political partner and they will always be in the ruling coalition. They were the kingmaker, der Königsmacher. Yeah? So that coalition, it could work, and maybe it is actually a good idea for Sachsen-Anhalt to kick out the Green Party of the coalition and just take a coalition with the FDP, because as you can see, the CDU has 33 seats, the SPD has still 7 seats, it's really tiny in the east here, and then the FDP with 6. The CDU just needs 10 additional seats, and with the 13 seats of the SPD and the FDP, that is absolutely possible. They could form this Germany coalition, or as I would say, the Old Republic coalition. Yeah, so you can already see that this green wave didn't really make it until Sachsen-Anhalt, but according to the polls, it was actually there. It might be that all these scandals of Annalena Baerbock, the chancellor candidate of the Green Party, is actually affecting this result here, and this mediocre result for the Green Party that is well below what they expected based on the polls has something to do with the fact that we have a classical Schulz effect here, and that is when these parties, these opposition parties, they declare a running candidate, then in the early days the popularity is really high because people in the leftist camp put a lot of their hopes into that person, Baerbock in this case. But then as time goes on and the journalists are actually checking the history of that candidate, and their past and their actions are put under more scrutiny, and they might also show some very unfortunate behavior during interviews, and they say stuff that is really hurting them in the end because they are not as smart or not as experienced as they were hyped up to be by the party and the media. And then as time goes on, their popularity actually declines, and then in the end their party is stuck with the old values, with their old polling numbers, and they are back to their normal traditional voter base, and this surge that they saw in the beginning cannot really be translated or transferred into actual surplus or gains in votes in the next election. And this is a completely virtual intermediate gain in the polls, but it doesn't manifest in the elections. And maybe this is what we already see here, or it is absolutely just specific for Sachsen-Anhalt. But now I want to comment on why I think this result is actually plausible and it is not that surprising. And that has a lot to do with the track record of the current governor, Rainer Haseloff. He is actually a very popular guy in that state, and overall I think in Germany. He has the aura of an elder statesman. He is not a radical, he is not a weirdo. He is, I think, a common sense guy, and his track record, at least when it comes to these fundamental economic metrics, is very solid, and there was a lot of improvement in recent years under his rule in Sachsen-Anhalt. Sachsen-Anhalt was always the weakest state in the economy. They had the highest unemployment, they had the lowest income per capita, and so on. We said they were holding the red lantern. That means die rote Laterne. That means they are the last. They are the worst on the list among all states. But now, as I already hinted at in my last video about it, there were clear improvements. The unemployment was going down. There are new investments in the region, while the income per capita is still comparatively low to Western states. You still have to remember that the rent and the cost of living is just much smaller than, for example, in Frankfurt or Hamburg or Munich. And if you have a good job with a good income in Sachsen-Anhalt, you can live much cheaper, and your actual buying power and your quality of life will be much higher. So it is absolutely plausible to me. I can absolutely understand why somebody in Sachsen-Anhalt who is doing well or whose life improved there will actually not become a protest voter. Let's not kid ourselves. A vote for the AfD is a protest vote. The AfD will do maybe good opposition work in the best case, but they will not be in a ruling coalition. They will not be in government there. And if these people are seeing, hey, I have hope that my children will have a good education and they can have a good job here, and I'm having a good job, I can buy a house for an affordable price, not like in Munich where a small rotten little house with no garden still costs 2 million euros and nobody can afford it anymore. If people are actually seeing some improvement, especially in the economic sphere or in employment numbers, why wouldn't they vote for Mr. Haseloff and his CDU? I can actually understand that in this particular case of Sachsen-Anhalt. So let me sum up. The big changes here, or the big surprises, are that the Liberal Party is once again a faction in the Landtag at Magdeburg. The CDU did way better than they did last time, and way better than the polls were predicting. The AfD is almost unchanged, a solid second place and still the largest opposition party. The Green Party almost scored as well as last time, and this green wave was broken apparently. Maybe it has something to do with the scandals around Annalena Baerbock. I will make videos on that soon, I guess. And then losses as predicted for the Commie Party and the SPD. Maybe the current coalition will be continued, or maybe the Green Party will be replaced by the Liberal Party, as I said, and instead of Kenya, we have the Germany coalition. So that was my quick report from the first results. They're not really final yet, but I don't think much will change as the last votes are counted. That was my report from Sachsen-Anhalt. And now a big thank you to all my supporters and my subscribers. Like, share and subscribe if you find this report interesting or worthwhile. And of course, you can support me via Patreon or Subscribestar. The links are in the description box down below. Take care, enjoy the rest of your day. Servus, Kameraden.